In 1983, over 100 million people watched the finale of MASH. It was the biggest television event ever. But here is the shocking truth. That massive audience said goodbye to a show that almost didn't make it past its first season. Even crazier, by the time it became a legend, almost all of the original stars were gone. They left because of jealousy, burnout, and broken contracts. But what if those exits were the exact reason MASH became untouchable? We are pulling back the curtain on the real reason these actors walked away, and why it saved the show. Imagine you are an actor on one of the biggest news shows on television. You are famous. People know your face. But there is a problem. Every week, you notice the scripts getting thinner. The jokes are going to another actor. The cameras are staying on someone else for too long. That is exactly what happened to the first major stars of MASH. McLean Stevenson, who played the lovable commanding officer Henry Blake, walked into the writer's office and made a decision that would haunt him forever. He wanted out. The show had only been on for 3 seasons, but Stevenson was frustrated. When the show started, he was one of the 3 big names alongside Alan Alda and Wayne Rogers. But by 1975, the writers were falling in love with Hawkeye. Alda was getting more lines, more camera time, and more of the laughs. Stevenson looked at his role and thought, I am the star. The audience loves me. He believed that if he left MASH to get his own show, America would follow him anywhere. He was confident. He was ready to be a superstar on his own terms. But the producers had a different plan. They didn't just let Henry Blake go home. They killed him. In the season 3 finale, a moment came that changed television forever. Radar walked into the operating room and announced that Blake's plane had been shot down. There were no survivors. The cast had no idea this was coming. The script kept the ending a secret. Their shock was real. Back then, television did not kill off beloved characters. But MASH did it anyway. Stevenson had a simple mistake, which he would later admit in an interview. He said, I thought everybody in America loved McLean Stevenson. That was not the case. Everybody loved Henry Blake. He believed his own fame was bigger than the character. But the audience did not care about him. They cared about the man in the army uniform. The moment that Radar delivered the news, MASH stopped being just a comedy. It became something deeper. But this was just the first crack in the cast. While Stevenson was leaving, another star was already packing his bags. What happened to Trapper John when he tried to walk away? And why did the studio let him go without a fight? The same season that ended with Henry Blake's death also saw another original star vanish. But here is the crazy part. Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John, did not even have a contract. He was working without one from day one. And that was the very thing that let him walk away when he felt the show was no longer treating him fairly. In the beginning, Rogers was supposed to be an equal to Alan Alda. They were the 2 leading surgeons, the heart of the show. But as the writers fell in love with Alda's performance, the scripts began to shift. Hawkeye got the funny lines. Hawkeye got the emotional moments. Trapper John started to fade into the background. Rogers noticed. And he was not happy about it. He had a simple demand. He wanted a contract that treated him fairly. But the producers offered him something else. They wanted to include a morals clause. It was vague and undefined. It gave the studio the power to decide what counted as immoral behavior. Rogers looked at it and said no. He refused to sign. But here is what makes the story unbelievable. The producers never followed up. They never pushed him to sign. The show went on with Rogers working without a contract. For 3 years, he kept playing Trapper John. But by 1975, he had had enough. When Stevenson announced he was leaving, Rogers made his own decision. He left too. Unlike Henry Blake, Trapper John did not get a dramatic death. His character simply disappeared. Hawkeye returned from a short trip and learned that Trapper had already been sent home. No goodbye. No closure. Just emptiness. It was a sad and quiet end for a character fans had grown to love. Rogers took a big gamble. He later admitted that if he had known the show would run for 11 seasons, he might have kept his mouth shut and stayed. But here is the twist. He did not need MASH. He became a successful businessman and investor, co-owning a famous bridal shop called Kleinfeld and even producing the show Say Yes to the Dress. He built a different kind of empire. So now the show had lost two major stars at once. How did they fill those holes? And who were the replacements that would carry MASH to greatness? By the time season 4 started filming, the show was in chaos. Two of its biggest stars were gone. Henry Blake was dead. Trapper John had vanished without a goodbye. The writers had to completely rebuild the 4077th from the ground up. But here is what they did that was genius. Instead of trying to copy the old characters, they brought in completely different people. First, they introduced Colonel Sherman T. Potter, played by veteran actor Harry Morgan. Potter was the opposite of Henry Blake. Henry was goofy, unsure, and easily pushed around. Potter was a regular Army careerman who had seen it all. He was firm, experienced, and close to retirement. Morgan had actually appeared on the show before as a crazy general. The producers loved his performance so much that they asked him to come back as the new commanding officer. But the question was, would the audience accept him? They had just watched Henry Blake die in the most shocking moment in television history. How could anyone replace that? The writers solved this by not trying to replace Henry at all. They gave the camp a completely new energy. Potter was stern but fair. He painted pictures. He rode a horse. He called everyone son and padre. He became the father figure the 4077th never knew it needed. And then there was the other replacement. Trapper John was gone, and his shoes were huge. The producers needed someone who could stand alongside Hawkeye without feeling like a copy. They found Mike Farrell, and his character was named B.J. Honeycutt. B.J. was completely different from Trapper. Trapper was a class clown who cheated on his wife. B.J. was a loyal, loving husband and father who missed his family back home. He was calm, practical, and often served as the voice of reason when Hawkeye got too wild. But he was still a prankster. He could laugh. He could drink with the best of them. He and Hawkeye became the greatest team in television history. The funny thing is, B.J. was originally going to be exactly like Trapper. Some early episodes even showed him wearing the same Hawaiian shirts and acting the same way. But Farrell fought to make the character his own. He wanted B.J. to be someone the audience could root for because he was a good man, not just a funny man. And the audience responded. Season 4 was a hit. The show didn't just survive. It thrived. But this was only the beginning of the changes. Another original star, Frank Burns, was about to have a mental breakdown on screen. By the end of season 5, the show had already survived 2 major exits. But the next one was completely different. Larry Linville, who played Major Frank Burns, had been on the show since the very beginning. He had signed a 5-year contract, and when it expired, the producers offered him 2 more years. But Linville said no. Here is why that decision was so important. Linville felt he had taken Frank Burns as far as he could. Frank was a hateful, cowardly, hypocritical man who was also a terrible surgeon. He was a cartoon villain in a show that was becoming more serious and emotional. Linville himself admitted that Frank was the type of character I personally despise. He wanted to play different roles. He wanted to be seen as more than just the whining ferret face. But here is the twist. The writers actually wanted to give Frank a proper goodbye. They wrote a special episode to open season 6. They offered Linville a lot of money to come back for just 1 more episode. But he refused. According to writer Ken Levine, Linville was going through a bitter divorce at the time and did not want his ex-wife to get half the money. So Frank Burns disappeared between seasons. There was no goodbye episode. No final speech. He simply was not there anymore. In the show, the explanation was surprisingly emotional. Frank had followed Margaret to Seoul after she married another man. He saw her leave, and his heart broke. He went crazy, started thinking every woman was Margaret, and got arrested by military police. He was sent back to America and promoted to lieutenant colonel. It was a sad and pathetic end for a sad and pathetic man. But this exit was different from the others. Henry Blake died. Trapper John just vanished. Frank Burns was humanized in his final moments. For the first time, we felt sorry for him. Now the show had a massive hole to fill. How do you replace one of the best villains in television history? And who was brave enough to step into those shoes? By the time season 8 rolled around, the show had already lost 3 original stars. Henry Blake was dead. Trapper John had vanished. Frank Burns had gone crazy. But the next departure hit the hardest. Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly was leaving. Gary Burghoff was the only actor who carried over from the original 1970 MASH movie. He was the heart of the show. The audience adored him. When Radar left, it felt like losing a little brother. But here is what the audience did not know. The real reason Burghoff left was not a creative choice. It was survival. In his own words, he wrote about leaving the show and said, "I couldn't function anymore. I'd given all I had to give to the part and to the show." He described what he called a burnout, a total depletion of vital energies. He had been on the show for 7 years, and every day was a battle. He later admitted, "For 7 years, no new person in my life called me Gary. Only Radar." The pressure of being a beloved character had completely taken over his identity. There was more. His marriage was falling apart. Director Charles S. Dubin remembered that Burghoff had serious personal struggles at the time. He was having trouble with his wife, and the divorce was a major factor in his decision. Burghoff also admitted that the show's demanding schedule had put a massive strain on his family life. He wanted off the show, not to become a bigger star, but just to be present for his daughter. When the writers finally gave Radar a farewell episode, Burghoff wanted a big dramatic moment. He wanted to cry on camera. But the director told him to fight the tears. Burghoff insisted on doing it his way. The next day, he looked at the footage and realized it was terrible. He begged to do the scene again, and this time he did it the director's way. That quiet, restrained moment is what made Radar's goodbye so powerful. But even after this emotional exit, the show still had one more secret. Who stayed through all 11 seasons, and what did they sacrifice? When you look back at the cast list of MASH, it is easy to think that everyone left. Henry Blake died. Trapper John vanished. Frank Burns went crazy. Radar went home. It feels like a revolving door of exits. But here's what most people do not realize. 4 actors stayed from the very first episode to the very last. And only 2 of them appeared in both the pilot and the finale. Alan Alda was the only actor who appeared in all 251 episodes. He never missed a single one. Loretta Swit was right behind him, only missing 17 episodes out of the entire run. Together, they were the backbone of the show. But there were 2 other cast members who also lasted the whole journey. Jamie Farr, who played Klinger, and William Christopher, who played Father Mulcahy, both appeared in every season. The thing is, Father Mulcahy was actually played by a different actor in the pilot. George Morgan took the role first, but the producers wanted someone with a quirkier personality. By the next appearance, William Christopher took over. Think about that for a second. Klinger was only supposed to be in 1 episode. Season 1 had him as a one-off character who wore dresses to try and get discharged. But the audience loved him. He came back for Season 2. Then Season 3. By Season 4, he was a series regular. The show kept surviving because it kept adapting. But here is the heartbreaking truth about the ones who stayed. They sacrificed everything. Alda dedicated 11 years of his life to one role. He directed episodes. He wrote episodes. He shaped the show into something meaningful. Squid tried to leave early on to star in another show called Cagney and Lacey, but CBS refused to let her out of her contract. She was trapped. She had no choice but to stay and make the best of it. Then there was the finale. The biggest television event in history. Over 100 million people tuned in to say goodbye. The show had survived every exit, every controversy, every burnout, and every broken contract. It became the most watched scripted episode of all time. And that record still stands today. But the real question is this. Did the final episode give everyone the closure they deserved? The final episode of MASH was called Goodbye, Farewell and Amen. It aired on February 28, 1983. Over 100 million people watched it. That is more than the Super Bowl. More than any show before or since. It was the moment television became a shared experience for an entire nation. But here is the thing. The finale almost broke the cast. It was not a celebration. It was an emotional war. The cast did not know the ending when they started filming. They knew it would be emotional, but they had no idea just how intense it would become. The writers kept the final scenes a secret. When Hawkeye finally realized that the woman on the bus had killed her own baby to keep it quiet, the moment was designed to break the character and the audience at the same time. Alda later admitted that the scene was one of the hardest things he had ever filmed. The tears were real. The pain was real. But the most powerful moment came at the very end. The war was over. The 4077th was closing down. In the final scene, B.J. Honeycutt said goodbye to Hawkeye. He could not put his feelings into words. Instead, he used rocks to spell out the word goodbye on the helipad. He got on a helicopter and flew away. Hawkeye looked down and started to cry. He had lost his best friend. The war had taken everything from him. He was going home, but he would never be the same. The writers wanted to end with that quiet moment. They wanted the audience to sit in silence and reflect on everything they had just watched. The show did not end with a laugh. It ended with a tear. Now here is the mind-blowing truth. If McLean Stevenson, Wayne Rogers, Larry Linville, and Gary Burghoff had stayed, MASH would have been a completely different show. It probably would have ended after season 5. The replacements made the show better. Potter brought wisdom. BJ brought loyalty. Charles Winchester brought complexity. Klinger brought heart. The exits forced the writers to evolve, to take risks, and to create something deeper than a simple comedy. The show became a study of humanity in the worst possible conditions. It showed us that war is hell, but laughter is medicine. It showed us that family is not always blood. It showed us that goodbyes are painful, but they are also necessary. So what do you think? Was the success of MASH built on the chaos of its cast leaving, or did the show survive despite those exits? Let me know in the comments below.